I need to work on the abruptness.
I was watching another live podcast last night, and they had a really good, and it went out, and then they came in and sort of.
Well, maybe you should just partner with whoever that was, because apparently they have it all figured out.
It wouldn't be bad because it was like a Marvel comic movie thing, DC superhero.
I see.
Yeah.
I see.
It was, but they were a little goofy there. They were having fun.
Were they?
They were having fun. They weren't having as much fun as we have.
Talking about
they were definitely not having as much
equity
fun
and privilege in the future and all that good stuff.
They definitely weren't having as much. I don't know. They might have been making more money than we make. I don't know.
Well, I mean,
they had some good sponsors.
If they're making any money off of their podcast, they're definitely making more money than us, because we make zero
off the podcast.
That's
true.
It's zero.
Although I will also say they had the donation thing. It's like for every $100 we're going to be watching the screen, then Kira's going to paint somebody's face, as a DC or Marvel character. So
we're definitely missing out. Maybe we should partner with them.
20 minutes went by and they only got $400 or something, but that was 4 face paintings. So. That's what we should do here at the Wicked Opportunities Live Podcast, is paint one another's face. So.
Paint one another's face.
Hello, Joy Forage Strategy from Louisiana.
We know who you are.
We know who you are.
We should paint each other. I'm still stuck on the we should paint each other's face.
Yeah, we probably actually shouldn't do that. This is the witty banter part of the podcast to allow people time to come in before we get down to business.
Well, it's not just that.
Well, I said we have fun here at the podcast.
We do.
We can't help ourselves.
We do. Well, I'm often a fan of saying, if you all ever watched Regis and Kathy Lee live. I'm dating myself pretty much.
Because I think they've changed several hosts since that time.
They
had Michael Strahan and
Kelly Ripa. Kelly does not like Michael. He left her for Good Morning America, and she was so mad about that.
Yeah.
And now they have what's his face, the guy from American Idol, right? That's who's there now.
I don't know.
Yeah. Anyway, the whole point of that is that they would purposely not see each other in the morning before the show, so that it kept their witty banter part fresh.
Oh, so they didn't talk and then
Yeah. So this morning when you thought I was pissed off at you, it was actually that I was just prepping for the show. By the way, we had someone say yesterday that they're going to miss out on the Wicked Opportunity show, and I thought they've obviously seen the podcast before. They use that term.
Show quality, yeah. Well, for those who
Ryan Seacrest, that's it.
Might have stumbled upon us. Welcome to the Wicked Opportunities Podcast live edition, where we do this once a month live, and it's pretty much the only podcast. And then the other weeks we just flood the airways with the non-live podcast
with nothing
or nothingness. Which desperately needs to change.
It's
but
tough.
There's a podcast here and there nowadays because times have been strange.
It's a lot, yeah.
Times have been strange.
We're traveling again, which is weird.
Yeah.
Because
that's a part of that strange. That's a part of the strange.
Yeah. It's not like getting back on a bicycle. It's like getting back on a bicycle with a lot of other people that don't wear masks.
The bicycle made for 252 passengers who are spreading their germs all over creation.
So it's
and welcome to the chapter 13 of this novel, where we now have 2 pandemics going, not one, 2 for the price of one. So.
Such a bummer. Such a bummer. So Wicked Opportunities live. Yes, I do try to offer up the fashion content for Wicked Opportunities Live, because it's like it's not a client, so you can see my shoulder and no one's gonna die. No one is gonna die. Look at my shoulder. By the way, this is my injured shoulder.
That might have, over the last several days, thought that she was. Has anybody ever seen us do the skit where she was like, and then I used to be a skier and I go back in the attic and all that? It basically was that.
So, yes.
Where she was like, oh, I think I'll take up skiing again.
Yeah. It wasn't skiing. It was like.
After several decades.
It was like my nephews were going down this inflatable slide at my parents' pool over the weekend. And for a moment, I was like, I'm making memories. I am making memories.
Yeah. You got to do what you got to do.
I got to participate in this experience. Yeah. And boy, did I make a memory. I think I don't know if I tore my rotator cuff or what. But P.S., you use your arms for a lot of things, is what
Afterwards, you realize.
Yes.
Whenever you strain a muscle, you realize afterwards how important that muscle was. Like you could strain a muscle behind your ear, and then once you're like, wow, I never realized to use my ear for so much, ear muscle for so much.
We're so
but definitely
old.
An arm. But
we're
definitely
so
an arm.
old. So old.
It's we're definitely speeding along the track here.
Yeah.
Come on, genetic modification, help us out.
Come on, radical life extension. Let's go.
I told everybody about you as a trend. Why aren't you doing me a favor?
Hop on it.
I said everybody 23andMe and genetic modification, but I don't see you writing me letters or sending me money in the mail. Genetic modification.
You know what it is? It's like, once the World Future Society conference stopped holding conferences,
right?
The work on radical life extension
was the end of that.
Really didn't
because
continue.
If you ever got the chance to go to the World Future Society conference back in the day,
I'd like to know in the chat if any of you have had the privilege, speaking of privilege, to go to the World Future Society conference, which is where we met.
Who has ever gone to? They don't hold them anymore, but it used to be a once a year. Used to the telomeres. We extend the telomeres. Used to be once a year conference, and I was about to say no offense intended, but it's definitely offensive. What I'm about to say is we used to call it the polyester conference or the polyester crowd, because the people that were showing up even late in the game were those who probably needed genetic modification the most.
Speaking of,
and it was a popular trend.
Speaking of World Future Society,
and now here I am. So.
Speaking of the World Future Society conference and podcast, I just did a podcast with Peter Hayward, which will hopefully be published soon. I'll let you all know.
The wonderful Peter
and
Hayward.
I got to tell the story of like how we met and everything. Everybody's already heard that story, but you know, I actually told him. Did I tell him? I mean, I sort of in passing told him that, but the main part, what I was telling him was, my first week at the job at Disney as a futurist was going to the World Future Society conference.
First week. So my boss had already bought tickets, and because they had heard about this conference, and I'm really actually glad that she didn't go, because that would have been the end of that department. Yeah.
Had she gone.
Yeah.
So instead she sent me, and when I was first offered that job, I was really unsure, because I was like, well, I'm not an HR person. I'm a finance person. I don't know, I didn't even know there was a field called foresight. Right. Isn't it great when you get to be the head of foresight at Disney and you didn't know what foresight was? Yeah, that's.
To be fair, it changed over time. You were an amazing futurist at Disney, but
right.
You're talking about the early days.
Early when they were like, "Hey, do this," and I had second like thoughts about doing it. And boy, when I landed, I don't even know, was it in DC that year? I don't even know. The year before Vancouver, where was it? Yeah. So I landed and I got in that conference and I thought, I have made a horrible mistake. My parents.
You were like, wait, did I get off at Comic-Con?
No. My parents who immigrated to this country with nothing as children, paid for me to go to college so I could do this. Right. I literally thought that. And I was like, I wonder if I could rescind my acceptance. But it was fine. Once I got in there, I saw, okay, all right, so there's a mixed bag here, but it's okay. It's okay. Anyway, so I think that we don't have the World Future Society conference. That's why we're not making strides, because our theory was that all of the old futurists were like, the reason they kept going to the World Future Society conference was like, we're going to live over. And
bring on genetic modification.
So.
And we've actually, it's sad because we've made a lot of progress in genetic modification or genetic engineering since the World Future Society conference is now defunct.
Yeah.
So I guess they just didn't hang on quite long enough. But, for those of you who are joining us today, you're probably not going to make it either. It'll be our kids or grandkids. Sorry,
so
I'm just being blunt.
But it does speak to the fact that a lot of the work that we do isn't really for ourselves when we're talking about foresight and futures thinking, even though, of course, the future isn't about the future, it's about today. And we're fond of saying that. It is true that when we create futures, when we work in foresight, we aren't just thinking about ourselves. And so that's part of the reason why we decided to make today's live stream about what it is. So this, let them eat cake.
Yes, the tyranny of privileged futures.
Right.
And that was a great point because I was thinking before we jumped on, and I know we had a brief discussion several times. One time it happens a month before, and then the second time is like 5 minutes before. And you're like, do you remember what the great prep meeting was about 30 days ago? But we've been doing this for a long time, so we're good to go. And we're depending on people in the chat to join in and be a part of the conversation anyway.
So here's the thing. When we originally started this podcast before the live stream, just the podcast itself, it was meant to capture the conversations that we have on the regular here.
That's right.
And so that's part of the reason why we, especially with the live, we don't try to script too much. So for the recorded ones, we want to keep to a certain time. And I don't know, there's just this whole thing about being recorded. So we sort of have an idea of what the takeaways are and stuff like that. Yeah. But for the lives, and this is actually a really good opportunity to include all of you.
That's right.
If you have a topic that you want us to talk about in upcoming live stream, drop it in the chat or send us a note, because we're always looking for great ideas, great topics that intersect with foresight, and everything really intersects with foresight.
It does.
So we try not to prep too much, but we did spend just at least a couple minutes just getting ourselves grounded on and then we had to stop because we were saying too many good things, and we didn't want to
don't script it too much.
Yeah,
and what I was going to say is one of the things I walked to the office kitchen, and I was thinking, and this is a weird segue, but I sort of want to open with this on purpose because I think it'll direct sort of what we're talking about here today. Do foresight professionals, should foresight professionals be agnostic? And what I mean by that is, should we try to direct where the future goes as foresight professionals?
Or should we be completely hands-off and objective?
Here's what the numbers say. Here's what the trends say. Here's what, where things are going. That's all we're here to tell you. We're just here to inform you.
And are you a robot? How does that work? Yeah. How do you do foresight work and not be a human being? And how do your values and your worldviews not play a role here? I don't get it, but
that's going to be a tough one.
I understand the theory behind the statement, but
so my answer is going to be yes and no.
Okay.
Because and that doesn't mean that you guys couldn't put a different answer in the chat if you want to, and let us know what you feel about this, but I think that we should be agnostic in the sense that we're not only pinpointing certain things, we're taking into account everything that's happening as much as we possibly can. This factor is weighing on it, these values, you might not like to hear this, but X, Y, Z, and da-da-da-da. So in that sense, you're agnostic, right?
Yeah, you don't want to pick and choose what you represent. And you always want to challenge your assumptions and
biases. And there are
biases.
people who call themselves futurists or who are floating around the field. As a matter of fact, over the last couple of years, we've seen this great influx of people who are like, I'm a futurist because of the pandemic. And they pick a lane. I'm actually a blah, blah, blah futurist. I'm a tech futurist, or I'm I really focus on the metaverse or whatever. And we have to be super careful. We have to be super. I have been on a metaverse killing spree.
Back it up,
lately.
Back it up. I'm glad we're on a delay there, buddy. Let's not make any enemies. No,
it's not a matter of making enemies.
No, it's not.
It could make enemies, but this. throughout the history of foresight and futures, there's plenty of people who have said, like I'm really a futurist about tourism, or I'm a futurist about leisure.
It feels like it can be overwhelming otherwise. So I get it. Yeah. You have an expertise.
But the reality is futures is supposed to be a generalist practice, right? Because what we know, and what you probably all have found in practicing futures, is that this trend or this idea or this event or this emergence that seems to have no relation to my industry or what I'm doing does and can very much impact what I'm doing. So I might be in tourism, and so I don't care about genetic modification, but it has a huge impact on it. And so we have to be agnostic in the sense that we're looking at all factors as much as we possibly can. So that's yes. The no part of my answer would be first of all, there's two parts of that. First of all, there's no way that you're going to be totally agnostic.
Nope. Yep.
Secondly, but you could try as much as you possibly can, and that makes for good foresighting. And
you need to challenge your biases.
You need to challenge your biases. So we're going to talk about that in a second, challenging your biases. Yeah. And the second part of that is, and I'm skipping ahead just a little bit, but I'll let us loop right back around, is that when we only put forward what is sort of in the zeitgeist, or what we can see on paper, or we quantify futures, or we say, here's the trends, we as futurists aren't saying what futures should or need to happen that would be equitable for all people. So it's a very dangerous game to say, well, I'm completely agnostic, because then we're not including that other 50% of futuring, which is not just looking at the trends and telling you what they are, but helping us to come together as a co-creative species and a planetary species and the cosmos to really say, what futures do we want to see happen?
Yeah.
And and the moment you say that, what futures would we like to see happen for humanity, you're challenging capitalism and cronyism and corporatism and et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And these are systems that need to be challenged. And I don't think there's a good foresight professional alive who won't say that we should be challenging dominant narratives and futures that are just speeding us along to somewhere. The tyranny of the dominant age, the tyranny of what is as opposed to what could be.
Yeah.
Right?
And so that you jumped in the deep end of the pool.
I did, but I think that sets us up for a good place.
Okay, so when we established this topic of privileged futures, it really stemmed from a lot from this idea that we share with all of our audiences, no matter who they are. We always talk about that it's a privilege to think about and actively create the future. It's a privilege. So when we're in a 3-day course, or when we're consulting with a client and working hand in hand with them to create a set of scenarios, whoever is in that room is privileged. And we don't think that that's great. We would prefer for everyone on the planet to have agency to create a more equitable future, but that's simply not the case. And so we wanted to talk about what happens when it's only a privileged few in the room where it happens, so to speak, and how we can avoid some of the pitfalls.
And that's the complaint all the time, that we're already worried, and for good reason, that the 1% of the world are controlling all of our futures. And they're the ones who are controlling the large corporate message, especially of mass consumption and, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, right? So are we going to let the uber wealthy and the tech capitalists control everybody's future?
Yeah.
And right now we're hearing, tons of pushback against that. Where are the indigenous voices? Where are multiple ways of knowing? And so, even as foresight professionals, we've had a lot of experience of how to help even a company whose goal it is to sell more of their product, generally speaking, to be a more conscious brand and to do the right thing. And so I'm not saying that, after we leave a client, 100% of what we would like to see in terms of being an equitable future happened every time, but we always go in with that, not only with that thought, but with that perspective, and we're not leaving without it.
Yeah.
And
so I will, and let me just pause here and say, again, I think all of the folks that are on this live stream and most of the folks in our ecosystem and community aren't necessarily like, don't consider themselves part of the ultra wealthy or part of the technology or Silicon Valley scene. So I think that's interesting, right? Because we become a conduit as foresight professionals because we work with those groups a lot.
That's right.
They're doing their own thing as well. There's a whole machine around both consumption and technology. Right. And I mean, look no further than this narrative around the metaverse, which is absolutely fascinating. It's infuriating and fascinating at the same time that this thing has been packaged. And, literally, I'm expecting in the back to school sales to see lunchboxes with metaverse on it.
Exactly.
Like, I mean, it's Jurassic Park, it's Minions, and it's the metaverse.
That's
like,
right.
do you have your lunchbox with the thermos inside of it that says metaverse? Because it is absolutely insane. We're not going to go down that path because we already did a podcast on Make the Metaverse Great Again.
I'll zip my mouth because it's been a hot topic again this week. It's so hard not to say something about it. And there is this great presentation floating around that this gentleman gave with one slide that is made, which is infuriating people. It's like, if you take this stage and you say the metaverse is the future, you don't know what you're effing talking about. But she won't let me talk about it.
So none of us are what you would call tech bros or in the elite probably. But the fact of the matter is that is happening. There is a sort of a machine around creating those futures with the dominant narratives of today. And so the point, I think, of our conversation today, and we'd love for you to encourage your engagement in the chat as well, is how do we as foresight professionals, as thought leaders in the field, as individuals that are facilitating these conversations, how do we ensure that those individuals that are not in the room, that don't have the privilege yet to create or talk about the future, how are they represented? And so for me, I feel the responsibility, and I feel anyone that has the time and the privilege to be able to dedicate to this, and if you're listening to my voice, you do. And I will say, let me back up and say one thing about that. I think a lot of people say they don't have time to do this, and that's bullshit. If you have time to scroll Facebook or Instagram, if you have time to do those types of things, then you have time to think about and create more equitable futures. When we're saying that there are people that aren't privileged, we're talking about those people that are barely able to survive the present.
That's right.
And they're the ones that are most impacted by climate change and by every other thing that's happening in the world right now. And so when we're in the room, when we're having these conversations like we're having today, we need to remember that they are on our shoulders, that we represent not only ourselves in these conversations, not only future generations, but almost more importantly, we represent all of those people that are silenced, that are silenced by the current system, that don't have a voice in these conversations. And that's a huge responsibility, but that's what we need to that's what we need to think about when we go into these conversations. Is it's not just me, it's not just the client, it's all of those people that don't have a say right now.
That's right. I mean, this might not relate directly, but I was telling you earlier that I saw a post this week of someone who works in foresight, and they were saying that what they did was, over the last several months, they worked with a group of people to gather all of the trend reports that are out there, as many as they could find.
Strike one.
Ooh, we'll talk about that in a second.
I'm just going to go ahead and do the editorial comments as you tell this story.
It's like the sports announcer.
Okay.
Strike one.
Strike one.
And
my brother, as you know, my younger brother played, little aside here, little fun fact, played baseball his entire childhood. My dad was like the manager for a period of time. My brother,
so
my older brother was the coach. Yeah. And I mean, we came from Cuba, so like that was a requirement.
The baseball capital of the world.
You had to. Anyway, so I know like all about baseball. Like I'm not a sports person at all, but I can score a game. I was a scorekeeper for many a year. And anyway, strike one, trend reports.
There you go.
We'll continue.
Wasn't there a Saturday Night Live skit like way back in the day where it's like baseball?
Of course, there probably was.
And I think it was a Cuban thing too.
Yeah.
It was really funny.
Yeah.
So anyway, They gathered all of these trend reports and put them in an AI. Strike two.
Oh, yeah, sorry. I was drinking coffee. Yeah. Strike two. That's how the umpire says it.
Yeah. They were, and their goal was to see if the work that they had done, the extensive work that they had done, to see what trends were most important, what was number one, what was number two, what was number three, if their human work would line up with what the AI said was the most important.
Can there be more than three strikes? Strike three!
And unsurprisingly, they found out that their human work was really deficient, and that the AI, in a short period of time, just from gathering as many trend reports.
Well, it only takes seconds for the AI to do it, so.
You stuck it in there, and it showed, and there's one that stood out to me in particular. They had actually, over months and months, listed as their number one trend. They named the trends too, so like cute names. I forget what it was, but it was like eco consciousness. And they found that was number one. The human one did. The AI said, nope, that's like number 15. The number one trend is convenience for consumers. And that was according to all the trend reports they found, which we know that all of those trend reports out there are unbiased, really
strike four.
Really really robust, looking at values, looking at what features we want to build. See, this is one of the, I'm going to make a really bold statement here.
It's your podcast, do it.
I can do what I want. It's my party, I'll cry if I want to. This is the part where I'm like, I don't know sometimes if all of us foresight professionals are talking about the same field. Are we even talking about the same field?
Yeah.
Because when you tell me, it's like, look, all I did was I just told you where, the extrapolative trends. I'm telling you what the trend report said. And we're no longer talking about but what futures do we want to build?
Yeah, but let's unpack that further, because beginning with the trend report, which I believe was strike one, I've lost count because I gave you 4 strikes. The trend report, so if you've been to any training that we've offered or any client engagement, we're not big fans of trend reports for a number of reasons. Number one, if you see a trend, it's the past. It's not the future. There's a reason why you can see it.
Yeah. As a matter of fact, I'm going to let you get right back to it. But it's like I put up a post on LinkedIn yesterday that our good friend B. Cavello, who is the director of emerging technologies at the Aspen Institute. And so you think she would be like, whoa. And she's an AI expert. She used to work on, wrong pronouns. They used to work on... Watson at IBM.
Yes.
AI expert. And this presentation is amazing because they show that from 1960 on, people were like, and in 5 years, AI will, in 1970, in 5 years, AI will be all the rage. In 1995, in 1 year, AI is going to be, and it's like the beat goes on. And B was showing that... even as an AI expert, that this, AI is going to be so great, and it's just been going on since 1955, and it just doesn't stop. So it's not that AI is not a legitimate thing. It's that we have to be really careful that most of the trend reports are tech reports. And they do not talk about the futures that we want to build, holding tech people to ethical standards, the amount of people that will never wear a VR glass in the world, ever put on a VR headset in the world, because all they care about is buying an Apple that doesn't break the bank. And I want you to get back on track again. I hope you remember where you are, but it's like, it was so important for us to understand that.
I mean, I was starting with the trend report, and we were going to make it to AI, but we could jump to AI. No.
Sorry.
We're good. No, we're good. You don't need to apologize.
I got off track, and I messed up B's, pronouns and the whole line, who's an amazing individual.
You got real flustered. Amazing individual. It happens. You corrected. It's good. So in the chat, Latino futurist, which I love, I don't know who that is.
Yes, it was Garrett Morris. That's it.
Says that, but also before the SNL thing, which is great.
Betty, good to me. That's right. That's right.
Okay.
Thank you. That's awesome.
Those who are well represented are already positioned to have a much greater influence on possible futures than those who are marginalized, right?
Yeah,
and so to take that a step further,
that's right.
Obviously, if we only allow privileged individuals to shape the future, it's going to look like a lot like today. And we're going to continue to subjugate those marginalized individuals. They're not going to have, ever get themselves out of that marginalized state. And so, again, if we're trying to create more equitable futures, then we need to do things differently. So we can't rely on trend reports because they silo away information. They're one-dimensional. They represent the past. They tend to not talk about value shifts, and they remove the human out of the equation. And so you mentioned tech futurists, and I think this is one of the biggest issues with the foresight field and the future in general in conversations is that people just tend to have visions of technology when they think about the future. And I think this is partly because of media and film and just the zeitgeist, but
it's used in retro futures because, the 1950s was this big push on what technology even is, how we defined it, the philosophy of technology.
Yeah.
Because again, roads, fire, sticks are technology, right? But we made it to be jetpacks and, flying cars and we got off on this path. There could be alternative futures, but it's a used future. It's a retro future that technology are these bright, shiny whistles and bells and objects and all. And so then, and now we've gotten to a place where technology has become the master instead of the servant that it always was meant to be.
Yeah, and I think it also is a situation where technology is a tangible manifestation. It's easier for people to visualize. And so when you have a trend report and you have a lot of technology, you're not focused on the values. The future is about people. When people aren't the center of your visions or conversations about the future, then those future narratives are never going to be equitable.
That's right.
They are just going to, further reinforce the dominant narrative. So one way as foresight professionals that we can avoid the tyranny of privileged futures is to not just use trend reports. And there's lots of ways to expand our thinking beyond that. To think about the value shifts, to include all domains, not just technology. So this is like
and
this
multiple ways of knowing, and multiple voices.
Right.
I mean, it's like how many voices are coming to the table when you're dealing with the future of X, the future of Y, the future of Z.
Right.
And so what that story I told a minute ago about feeding all the information to the AI is suggesting really is that, oh well, as a futurist, I showed you convenience because that's the dominant trend, the narrative, the pathway that we're on, instead of but what are alternative visions of the future? And so when you suggest that I fed all the information into an AI and it spit out convenience was number one, you're suggesting that my job as a futurist is to show you what the dominant narrative is and to put all of your eggs in that basket and not to show you alternative visions of the future based on marginalized voices, multiple ways of knowing, value shifts and all. And so AI can't tell you any of those things because it doesn't have the information to feed that to. And that's exactly what B was saying in their report was, as an AI expert, I can tell you that if we rely only on that information to be fed to us, we're going to be handcuffed to the past and we will have no alternative visions of the future because AI will tell you this is the dominant narrative, this is what's unfolding, this is the trend, and there's no other way to see the future. That's tyranny. That's tyranny.
So our conversations and our work around the future can't just rely on data around the present or the past. We can't just think about and discuss what people are doing today, as you said. We have to discuss and create, the future that we want. So I think, again, relying on one-dimensional trend reports, ensuring that you're covering different domains, as you said, ensuring that you have the people in the room. Again, it's sometimes difficult because these individuals don't have a voice, aren't in the room. So if we can't have everyone in the room, how do we ensure that all those voices are represented?
I mean, I can't get over and this relates exactly what you're saying. I can't get over the number one trend is convenience for consumers. Like, what consumers?
Well, it reminds...
I rode through a town in Montana this past week where they're not thinking about convenience and consumption because they don't have anything. There was a sign every 5 feet that said, "Don't do meth."
Yeah.
What?
Well, it's that, sort of tone deaf response that we've seen time and time again. I mean, we can give examples without like talking in specificity.
Oh, I love this.
What?
So someone in the chat says, I'm working from the opposite spectrum, marginalized youth in Kenya. I think this is exactly what we're talking about, really.
Yes.
Who have experienced various forms of trauma and have limited agency, hope theory, right, to engage with futures thinking. But when they undergo community-led trauma healing programs, their future consciousness is unlocked, and their increased agency enables them to engage with scenario building, etc.
That's right.
Working with 3 groups for now, go through CLA with.
That's perfect.
I mean, that's exactly what we're talking about, and that's not going to be in the we fed AI the trend reports and this is what it said.
So it
doesn't appear.
It begs the question about, because I think if you have the opportunity to work with marginalized communities, which we have and we do as much as possible, I think the other question alongside the agnostic question that you posed earlier is, should corporate organizations have foresight? Meaning, should we expend energy trying to implement strategic foresight in these corporate or capitalistic systems? Because in reality, it's, it goes contrary to what sort of that organization was built for. And we've always been of the mindset that we have to work with the systems that we have in place right now. And if we ignore this large swath of the world and the economy, then there's no way that we're going to be able to move the needle.
That's right.
And further, these corporations are made up of individuals, and it's those individuals that we're trying to reach. So when
many who we have found care very much about what we're talking about.
For sure,
so
that's
you
what
just
I'm
think,
saying.
like, if you paint this 2-dimensional cardboard picture, I'm not going to do any corporate foresight because I know everybody in there is a evil robot. And what you really find is, and especially if they're wanting to hire you to do futures work, those people that hired you are probably like, how do we change this? What do we do? I'm not saying they all do, but we found many do.
Yeah.
And so I love your point, because if you just ignore all of these people working in these corporations, you're not actually getting in and infecting them with the thing they need to hear.
Yeah. I mean, it's tough because we've been in rooms where, for example, we were talking about, bridging the digital divide and giving more access to the internet to more people, because so many people still don't have good, reliable internet, and it's a requirement to live. It is a requirement. But yet in the U.S. we don't have clean water and we don't have safe schools, so it's kind of hard to make the argument around internet. But anyway, I also don't have autonomy over my body anymore, but I digress.
Next podcast.
Yeah, there you go. There's a podcast topic. Anyway, which I wouldn't mind. I brought it up in our client engagement. It came up last week in Montana. So, I mean,
we were in Montana working with the library group last week, and they were, very concerned about that for their communities and what's going on. So, again, that speaks to the fact that it's like, if you look at the headlines only, you'll miss the fact that on the ground there's a lot of people going like, what do we do? And we care very much, and this is a big issue for us, and et cetera. As a matter of fact, their big thing is librarians who had some power, maybe that's the wrong word, but they had influence as librarians. They're not just like your average librarian. A lot of them were like, I'm the head of blah, blah, blah.
Yeah.
We're like, how do we use our position to make sure that there's progression for all voices?
So let me just finish this thought just to share with you that, we because I think a lot of times I think we do a good job here at the Future School of like, not airing our dirty laundry, but of like speaking the truth and being really candid. We've talked about times that we've been fired from engagements that we've quit, we've fired the client. We've talked about, pitfalls and mistakes, because that's real life and that's how we learn. So I don't think it's off brand for us to say, this story, but we were talking about creating or bridging the digital divide. So I'll just say it really quickly. And these individuals that were leaders in our community, this is here in Central Florida, leaders in our community. And when we were trying to present this issue as one that they could take on and use futures thinking to try to overcome, this is before the pandemic.
Yep.
The response we got was, well, can't they just go to McDonald's to use the Wi-Fi?
Sure, why not? McDonald's has Wi-Fi. Well, I think we read a stat earlier today that said that the Wi-Fi access or immersion in the United States is at 92% now, and I'm like, total BS. What are you talking about?
Yeah.
I know for a fact that like here in Orlando, like maybe 50% at best.
Well, there's lots of homeless people, but I'm pretty sure they're not driving on,
so,
streaming
and
Netflix.
again, that just goes to show that those numbers are
those stats are really funny.
The stats are based on like, oh, well, my city has Wi-Fi, so that's 100% for this city.
In theory, yeah, you could get Wi-Fi if you could pay for it. I just want to acknowledge some stuff in the chat.
Oh, there's amazing chat going on here.
Of course, we work with nonprofits and entrepreneurs, and our belief is that everyone should fuel their leaders, their strategies, their organizations, whatever the type, with foresight. We believe it should be the operating system of our institutions, of our governments. But we brought up the corporate piece just because we tend to get a little bit of pushback sometimes, like that we're, again, appealing. But when we go into those corporate environments, we challenge and we not only speak to the individuals and try to change their perspective, but we challenge them, and we have made a difference. And
somebody earlier said in the chat way back, oh, that would make a great conversation. You don't have to go back.
Okay.
You won't find it. It's way back there. But somebody had said that would make a great conversation. How do we vet futurists to hire?
Yeah.
And I think somebody online was saying that this past week too, like what makes a good vet for it. And we know a lot of good futurists that aren't a part of the TFS team that I would say, if you didn't want to hire us, I would give you a list of other people that I think are good futurists to hire that will really do a good job, because not only will they be saying for your company, you should be looking at this, and I know that you already want to look at this, but you also need to look at this, and this. They're genuine concerns for your corporation, but they're also concerns that as Sheila and others are saying on here, with taking into consideration the voice of rivers and trees and animals, and of course of other humans that are your consumers, but that you don't care. All you care about is that they buy something. And I'm telling you, a lot of these companies are like, but we know. Either they'll know because they know it's bad for them if they don't do it, or they know because they genuinely care that they can't only just be like, buy more buy more pens, buy more plastic straws, because they know that they have to change, either because they're being forced to or because they genuinely care. But one or the other. I don't care if they're forced to. Good. Let's make them do it, because either way, to be able to do the right thing, right?
I think it's an interesting comment here that obviously corporate activity is a lot short term. It can't hurt to get a few of them thinking. And that's a big part of our practice.
That's
and
right.
I think, again, foresight's a team sport. And we really focus on, teaching people how to fish. And what that means is that, generally speaking, when someone comes to us, they already sort of innately think this way. They've even if they've never heard of it, they sort of just are naturally curious and are open-minded. But what we try to teach them isn't just how to become a full-fledged futurist. Of course, we help them do that. But primarily, we're helping them bring others along.
Yes.
And that's the skill of the futurist that I think you would want to vet for, is like, it's not about knowing all the trends or knowing all the issues. It's about knowing how to facilitate conversations, to get people out of their comfort zone, to not, chastise them or shut them down, but to really help them unearth their biases and assumptions and let them see the potential for a future or futures that benefit all. There is an answer here for us, and it requires us to measure differently. How we measure success. Totally
different metrics, right? We had a big company that we were working for, actually a public company that we were working for recently say, be provocative, we need to know. And then when we came back to them with all this amazing stuff that actually was coming from internal voices, they were like, too provocative. And not that they didn't think the ideas were good. They were like, but how would we measure the ROI?
Yeah.
And the answer was, oh,
not the way you're doing it today.
Not the way you're doing it today. You can still measure. It's just a different metric, right? Mm-hmm. And I love this because the point that I was trying to make a minute ago was around the idea that if we're being vetted, are we doing a good job as futurists? I would honestly say, I'm just going to be very blunt here, that we didn't just tell you only what you wanted to hear. We didn't say, well, here's a trend report, and we got all of it, and the AI pumped out the information. And I know that there's a lot of people that are going to hire futurists based on that. And again, like I said, this is not a pitch. I'm not making a commercial. There's other good futurists that would do this too. But what we believe and what we would say on this podcast to all of you is that go in there and tell people that I'm looking as rigorously and robustly as possible. We're bringing alternative visions of the future to you. We're not going to only just say, like, look, we're people who vet trends, and we found that the number one trend was convenience. You guys should pay attention to that. That's not the full story. That's not enough. Yeah. And that's the tyranny of privileged futures, because that's just telling people exactly what the dominant narrative already wants you to hear.
Yeah, Ashley answered this in the chat, but we definitely believe that futures thinking is for everyone, and it's our mission to democratize the field to that end. So, clearly reaching decision makers is powerful, because if we get people that are already making decisions or in those positions, we can make a difference for those that are disenfranchised. But there's a reason why marginalized communities and disenfranchised individuals don't have futures thinking. I don't think it's a bug. I think it's a feature. And we've talked about this before. I think that those in power benefit from the vast majority of individuals not having or not feeling that they have agency to create a better future for themselves.
That's right.
When we keep people in those positions of disenfranchisement and of not having a voice and of just focused on survival, then they can't possibly take part in democracy and in in community, in society. And so as long as they can just be kept silent and away, then they can just be used as labor and as, something to step on as individuals are going on. And it doesn't have to be that way. I think that's the most frustrating part. And it goes back to the narratives we hold and how we can promote other narratives. And a lot of those are in the chat, I think, really powerful.
Yeah, I was seeing, I think it's Stephen, if I'm wrong, correct me, but was saying, 400 million youth across Africa. You want to expand TFS here? Of course we do.
We do.
And we've been involved in efforts like that before. And of course, they were tooting their horn, as both being emerging fellows at the APF, which I think is amazing. Toot your horn, toot away.
Toot away.
And then Sheila was saying, well, I'll toot my extra horn. I'm on the Global Advisory Council for the Future School, which we love Sheila being a part of that. I hope she's on for a long time. And the reason I mentioned that is because both of them are really having this great conversation back and forth, and others are engaging in it, exactly what you're saying, like who gets included in those features. And it's not a bug, it's a feature that 400 million youth, and as my Indian friend was saying in here just a few minutes ago, can we include futures at the school level? And that K through 12 has been mostly about memorizing stuff and just the dominant narrative over and over again. I mean, I think you and I would probably say, you don't have to agree with this, you and I would probably say that school really should be more about thinking about the future than about the past.
Yes.
I'm not saying we shouldn't learn any history, because I think it's important, but are we equipping K through 12 to really be futures thinkers about alternative futures? And that's suggesting that a lot of the times they don't want them to, because I want you to graduate to be a part of the system and the machine and the machinery and get into the dominant narrative.
The last
support
2 years.
My economy as it is.
Yeah, the last 2 years, people got a taste of working from home, and now every CEO,
I'm out.
Every CEO is like, bring her back, and they're like, I'm not going to. I'm not going to unlearn what I've experienced the last 2 years. I have work-life balance that I never had before. I get to see my kids. It's just ridiculous, and so I think too that as foresight professionals, we've said this before, it's really easy to get sort of demoralized and lose our inspiration or...
Especially when, and I'm just feeling bold today, especially when I see other good futurists saying that the futures field is about giving you the latest trends.
Yeah.
And I'm telling you, trend hunting is about the latest trends.
Yeah.
I can't harp on this enough. The futures field is not about trend hunting.
No.
It includes trends, of course, but that's only a small part of futuring. A small part of futuring. And if a futurist wasn't saying anything about trends, they wouldn't be a good futurist. But if they're saying if they're focusing on trends as being the key to foresight, that's wrong. That's completely wrong, and it's just not the whole, kit and caboodle. And I love, what a lot of people are even, pointing to that right now. Sheila says, without foresight, one is disempowered. Those who know us here know that we believe that foresight is a critical element in humanity and in the cosmos and in going forward. And it's more than we can talk about on this podcast today. So yes, it's not just about teaching everybody futures. It's about unlocking their ability to engage in futures. And as Latina Future says, when our future horizon is just your next paycheck, you're going to disempower people and they're not going to be involved.
Yeah. So, I mean, I think
Tyranny.
Even as someone who is privileged enough to do this work, day in and day out, it could be easy to get, demoralized, especially depressed as we look at the headlines and as things go off. But I think for me, maybe this doesn't resonate with everybody, but for me, knowing that I'm not only responsible for my own future, but by those, for those that don't have a voice, to me, that makes a huge difference. And that makes me want to fight harder, work harder, continue to move forward. As you said, it's not just about trends, it's about the push and the pull of the future.
That's right.
What future do we want to create? What future do we want to pull to today? And so if you're new to this field or if you're a seasoned veteran, let's not forget that what this field is meant to be about and what we can make it about. It is the best part of the work that we do.
Oh my God, I love that you said that. What does this field about? What can we make it about?
Yeah.
And so if you're an alumni of the Future School or you're engaged with us in any other way, you probably hear a bit of a different message here from a lot of others, not everyone. I mean, we have our futurists that we love. So Helen Yatella, good friend of the Future School, and gosh, there's just so many more. Of course, all the people that are on the GFAC. Sheila's here, the Phil Future guys, in the Philippines, the Engaged Center for Foresight in the Philippines. I think they're speaking a similar message, and it's that the futures field should be much more than just being captured by traditional, tell me the trends, strategic planning, linear model. I need to know what's coming next. That's not foresight. That's not foresight. That's not foresight. I'm going to preach on my soapbox. And I think when we make that foresight, we get right in line with the tyranny of privileged futures.
Yeah, Ashley's right. It's one of the reasons that we are excited about this retreat in September, and it's going to be an opportunity for us to just let something organic materialize. Unlike anything we've ever done, can't be replicated online. Yeah. It's going to be a very immersive spiritual experience. Yes. And I think, we could do a whole podcast on that, which maybe we will at one point. This is, I think, the venue to discuss that, because I think people shy away from the idea of calling this a spiritual experience or having a spiritual element. But when we do that, when we shy away from that, when we make it mechanistic, when we try to make it, not about empathy and love and spirituality, that's where we go wrong.
We're just telling it like it is.
At the end of the day, it's
I've been doing this for a long time. I can't keep pretending that foresight is something that's not. Foresight is a mechanism for revolution for humanity.
Yeah.
Bottom line.
Yeah, we could joke and say we have 0 F's to give at this point as it relates to
and if you want to get good foresight for your company or your business or whatever, hey, I'm here to help you. And if you're like, no, I think good foresight is just telling me what I already want to hear, I would say good. You would make a terrible client for me anyway. Yeah. And again, we love the part of our charter that is working with each of you. So if you're on this podcast, on this live stream, or you're part of our community, chances are, if you are working with an organization, you're doing this work inside. I would say you're doing God's work. If you're doing this in a corporate environment, I did it. I know. That's right.
But a lot of our alumni and a lot of the people we work with through the Future School, through the public-facing programs, are individuals that are hanging a shingle or are looking to do this in their communities.
A lot of them,
And so this is where our passion lies, is supporting them. It's why we did the Year Free, which is, again, Year Free, it's still going on. Free access to all of our resources. The Natural Foresight Framework is now open source. There's a ton of new templates in the Resource Center at our website, thefutureschool.com. You can still nominate someone to receive free tuition in one of our global programs. The program in October would be, I think, great for Asia Pacific, if I'm not mistaken, in terms of the time zone. I could be wrong, but I'm pretty sure.
No, yeah.
And you could also see if someone could nominate you. So you can look at our website for that information. And then free inspiration. We have these live streams. We have a great GFAC live stream that happens quarterly. We have a great one coming up in a couple of weeks with Popal Bishop.
Oh, man, it's going to be
the beginning of
good.
August. So if you haven't registered for that, check that out.
And I'm glad you brought that up, because the Popal GFAC live that's coming up is right in line with this, because she's going to be talking about multiple stories and alternative stories of the future from voices that are usually unheard, and that, thank goodness, we're seeing a big shift going on, especially in the futures field, of people saying no more dominant voices, no more colonized voices. We're going to hear from multiple voices.
So it's a great continuation of this conversation. So in terms of these conversations, make sure you subscribe to our YouTube channel. That's the best way to be notified when we have our next one. We do these live streams monthly. If you have ideas about future live streams, make sure you reach out and let us know. If you are interested about our retreat, there's a couple spots remaining, only a couple weeks, I think, to get registered for that, because we're moving on. We're moving on to like ordering cool stuff for the people that are coming, and like finalizing plans. And
as someone had said in the chat, this will be a retreat that's all about come to Jesus moments, which is a phrase, if you're not familiar with, it doesn't have anything to do with Christianity or Jesus. We're not going to be doing picking a certain religion there to talk about. No. It means, we're gonna
strip down.
We're gonna
There's gonna
we're gonna get real.
Yeah. Just to give you a sense, we're in an amazing location, completely unplugged. It's 2 hours from the nearest airport. We're all on our own in this retreat location for several days. We'll be doing forest bathing and yoga and spiritual walks, and talking about
stone soup dinners.
Yeah, we're talking about the future of foresight and how it can become more collaborative and co-creative. And so if that jazzes you and you're interested, like I said, there's still a couple slots remaining.
I actually love Tanya's comment here too. My best friend said the scenario storytelling sounded like I was in a cult. And I was like, a cult that kills soulless capitalism? Sign me up. But, that's interesting, though, because, first of all, best friend, so I'm not saying anything bad about your best friend. But it is interesting. But it is interesting, though, that, it's like that perspective could be, it sounds like you're in it, and they haven't challenged their dominant narratives. Like, it sounds like you're off the beaten path from the Sneetches with stars upon thars, So.
Maybe they were excited. Maybe they were excited about that cult.
Who knows? Guys, sign me up for the cult.
Yeah. Well, again,
I told somebody a long time ago, by the way, everybody's in a cult. They got really mad and unfriended me on Facebook. I was like, everybody's in a cult. Get over it.
Yeah. Well, hopefully you've enjoyed this conversation. Now that I'm like sort of over the fear of the live stream, I feel so old saying that, but like, guys, it's super stressful. It's super stressful. It's not just like a webinar on Zoom. It's super stressful. But I felt less stress this time. Less stress. And my arm hurts a little less, so I'm really excited about that.
Just relax.
Just relax. Mm-hmm. Just relax.
Get the CBD.
My shoulder made an appearance on a live stream, which is really exciting. We love chatting with you all. I really love this.
It's amazing.
This platform and the ability to hear from all of you in the chat. Ashley's popped in some